Hey guys, welcome to a video lesson on help with problem set number 16. Here I have number 1 written out. So I just want to reiterate what you learned in your lesson video, and that's this part in here. When you divide by any number, it doesn't matter what the number is, you can convert this to multiplication. As long as you take the reciprocal, you want to flip this number around. You're not taking the opposite sign. You are just flipping this over. So it's as though you just take the number and turn it around. Okay, so if I take it and turn it around, it's now, where the heck, there we go. It's now 4 over 1. Okay, so let's begin. So anytime I see division, I'm going to rewrite it. Oops, sorry about that. So I have negative 2.2 times negative 2, divide becomes times, and when I change this to times, I'm going to flip this, so it becomes negative 4 over 1. I could also write this as negative 4, because the over 1 is the same as negative 4. So you can leave it as over 1, but then that starts to confuse students. I'd want to leave this over 1 if I had other fractions in the problem, but I don't. Negative 4 is the same as negative 4 over 1. So since I have more integers than fractions or decimals, I'm going to leave it as negative 4. Okay, then times 5. At this point, you decide how you want to multiply. You can use the commutative property and multiply any numbers that you want first. In my opinion, I like to do all the whole numbers or all the integers first. So negative 2.2 times negative 2, and I'm going to times these two first to get times negative 20. Negative times positive is negative. Okay, now I'm going to times these two next. Negative 2.2 times 40. Negative times negative equals positive. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to come over here and take 40 and 22. Now, a lot of you are like, wait a minute, it's negative and there's a decimal. When I have a decimal, I'm just going to take the number and ignore the sign and the decimal just for a minute. And I'm going to multiply like I have all whole numbers. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 4 is 8. I'm done with this 2. Now let's go here. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 4 is 8. Now we add 0, 8, 8. Now I'm going to add the negative back in, and I'm going to add the decimal back in. What's a positive times a negative? Negative. Now I have one decimal place here. So from the right, I'm going to come in one decimal place. So negative 2.2 times 40 is negative 88. Some students like to write negative 88.0 because that's what they got here. Either solution is okay. All right, let's go to number 2. So for number 1, I know there's a part A, B, and C. All I wanted you to do is solve the problem. So what we did here is completely fine. So number 2, we have 2 parts. Here's part A. I have 2 1/4 times negative 8. I'm going to show you two ways. I'm going to call it method 1 and method 2. Okay, with these lessons, the one where we did adding and subtracting, I think that was lesson 15, maybe 14. You were learning the properties, commutative property and associative property. So the objective here and there is to learn different ways to solve a problem using these number properties. And some students are like, well, why do I have to do all that extra work when I know how to do it another way? That's completely fine. I'm not telling you to do it this way. I'm just trying to show you another way to make some of the math a little less painful. So here's the way most students are used to. So 4 times 2, I'm going to make this improper. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So I get 9 over 4 times, and if I want to make this look like a fraction, just like we did up here, I can just put a 1 under it, times negative 8 over 1. So before I multiply straight across, top and bottom, I want to see if I can find common factors to reduce. So when I look at 4 and 8, 4 times 1 equals 4. They share a 4. And 4 times 2 gives me an 8. So both of these numbers share a 4. So what I'm going to do is take 4 and divide it by 4, which gives me 1. And I'm going to take this 8, divide it by 4, which gives me 2. And don't forget the negative comes along. So now I have negative 2. Okay. What this does is it allows me to simplify the fraction before I get some larger number here and then I need to reduce. So I'll show you what would happen down here if we didn't simplify first. What number was this? Negative 8 over 1. So over here, 9 times negative 2, we get negative 18. 1 times 1 is 1. And this is the same as just saying negative 18. So now we know the answer. Let's make sure that we can do the work some other ways. If I don't simplify like I did here, cross reduce, 9 times 8 gives me negative, signs are different, 72. 4 times 1 is 4. Now I need to take a look at 72 and 4 and divide it by some number to simplify it. Since they're both evens, one of the easiest numbers to divide by is 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. I'm going to bring the negative here. And I'm going to take 72 and divide it by 2. Now do you see how much more work this is already? 2 into 12 is 6. So I get 36 over 2. Now, since I have more even numbers, I can divide by 2 again. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. I'm going to bring the negative along, and I'm going to take 36, divide by 2. Some of you can probably do some of this in your head. I get 18. So you decide which method you like better. I mean, if you're going to do it this way, I'd rather cross-reduce first, because all of this extra dividing is a lot of work. But if you're the kind of student who hates all this cross-reducing, well, then you're going to have to do the simplifying at the end. So it's a matter of where do you want to reduce, at the top or at the end here. But if you notice, either way, we get negative 18 as a solution. Now here's method 2. Method 2 is to take 2 1/4 times negative 8. What I want to do is I want to take this whole fraction and multiply it by negative 8. But I can take 2 1/4 and break it down to 2 plus 1/4. So all I did was take this fraction and write it into 2 separate pieces. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply all of this by negative 8. So what we're doing here is we're using the distributive property. So I'm going to take 2 and times it by negative 8. Plus, I'm going to take 1/4 and times that by negative 8. So let's repeat. I want to take 2 1/4 and times it by negative 8. But instead of doing the entire number all at once, I'm going to take the 2 times it by 8. And I'm going to take the 1/4 and times it by, sorry, I keep saying 8, I mean negative 8. So here, negative 8 times 2, we get negative, signs are different, 16, plus, I'll show you over here, it's negative 8 over 1 times 1 over 4. If you don't reduce, you get negative 8 over 4. 8 divided by 4, negative 2. if you cross reduce, 4 divide 4 is 1, 8 divide 4 is 2, negative. And if you multiply straight across, negative 2 times 1 is negative 2 over 1, or simply negative 2. So it's up to you which way you feel like doing this. At the end, over here, we get negative 2. Now we end up with a very simple addition problem. Negative 16 plus negative 2. Remember, we are in addition now. We're not in multiplication anymore. So in addition, when my signs are the same, you add, keep the common sign. So do you notice I got 18 every time? Negative 18. It is up to you to decide which way you like best. I'm just here to show you the different methods. Personally, I think method 2 is the easiest way. But some of you are like, well, what the heck's going on in here? I took each part of the fraction, and instead of multiplying the whole thing at one time by negative 8, I took the 2, times it to negative 8. I took the 1/4, times it to negative 8, and then added those two products together. That's what I did there. So that was A. Let's go to B. So 2B, we have 2 over 3 times negative 7. I know it's not written this way on your paper, but I'm just going to put negative 7 over 1, so they both look like fractions, plus 2 over 3 times negative 5 over 1. So just a quick reminder, I see times, plus, times. You want to make sure that you're using PEMDAS, order of operations, that you multiply before you add the two answers together. Because in PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, we multiply and divide before we add or subtract. So we're going to do this two ways again. Method 1, and over here I'm going to show you method 2. You pick whichever method you like best. If you want to learn both, great job to you. So the first way is probably the way most students will tackle this problem. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it this way. Once again, it's just different ways of doing the problem. So in multiplying fractions, I'm going to do this part first. You just go straight across. So 2 times negative 7, negative 14. And 3 times 1 is 3. So I get negative 14 over 3. Done. Plus, now I'm going to times these two. 2 times negative 5, this is my operator, is negative 10. And 3 times 1 is 3. Now when I look at this step, I'm now in addition. I was multiplying, now I add the two products together. In addition, you need to have a common denominator. Great, it's 3. Now I'm going to take the numerators. I'm in addition. Since the signs are the same, I'm going to add them and keep the common sign. Now I'm in division. Do you guys see that? I added these up, but I have this big fraction here, which reduces to negative 24 over 3. Now, what is 24 divided by 3? I hope you're saying 8. And negative divide positive is negative. So that's method 1. Here's method 2. Okay. If you notice, negative 7 and negative 5 are both being multiplied by 2/3. So what if I take 2/3 and instead of multiplying 2/3 by negative 7 and by negative 5, I add the negative 7 plus negative 5. Okay, parentheses in parentheses is okay. So I would take 2/3 times 7, negative 7 plus negative 5 is negative 12. And I'm going to put this over 1 so it all looks like fractions. At this point, if you like to cross-reduce, let's cross-reduce. So I'll show you two different ways of tackling this step. So this is the same exact step. I'm going to show you two different ways. If you just go straight across, you get negative 24 over 3. And when you divide that out, you get negative 8. Here, if I cross-reduce, I'm just at the last step. I'm going to take 3 and 12, divide them by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. 1 times 1 is 1, which still says negative 8. So once again, you notice 3 different ways of tackling, we get the same solution. Which way is the right way? I don't care. Just pick a way, do it right, and get the solution. So that was B. Sorry, I have the worksheet up on the computer, so I keep looking down, then up. So here is the worksheet. So I'm just taking a look at number 3 here real quick. All right, so your job is to figure out where her mistakes are. And honestly, it is really, really hard to look at someone else's work and be like, this is where they made the mistake. I have worked with some of you and you are really good at this step. Generally speaking, most students find it easier to first do the problem and then go back and find the mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the original problem up here and I'm going to write it down on my paper. So let's do that now. So I have 0 and 38 hundredths times 3 divided by negative 1 over 20 times 5 divided by negative 8. All right, I'm going to sharpen my pencil and I don't want to pause, otherwise I'm going to lose this video, so please bear with me. Okay, sorry. So I see divide here twice, once and twice. So remember, when you divide, you take the number, take this to times, and just flip these around. So we get 0 and 38 hundredths times 3 times, I'm going to flip this. So if I flip the numerator and denominator around, I get negative 20 over 1. Right? Negative 20 over 1, which is the same as just saying negative 20. Good? So times negative 20. This is already times 5. Don't change the times. It's just like subtraction. Anytime you see subtraction, you make minus, plus, and the number that comes right after it, take the opposite sign. Now here, what we're doing is we change divide to times. It's not the sign that changes, it's the flipping of the number that changes. It's called reciprocal. So here we are. Now this is the same as negative 8 over 1. Right? Currently. So if I change this to times, I want to flip this number around to negative 1 over 8. So a question that comes up a lot, is, how do I know where to put the negative? I like to leave it floating around up in the numerator if I have a fraction. All right, but it doesn't matter where you stick it, numerator or denominator. So now we look at this. I have a decimal, I have integers, fraction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the integers. And do you notice I take time to look at the whole problem and see what's going on? Everything's being multiplied to each other. So we are able to use the commutative property. So I'm going to take 0 and 38 hundredths times, what's 3 times 20? I hope you're saying 60. And positive times negative is negative 60 times 5 times negative 1 over 8. Okay, now I'm going to multiply these integers. So 38 hundredths times I'm going to ignore the 0 for a minute. I'm going to teach you like some 0 properties. What's 6 times 5? Hopefully you're saying 30. Now, how many zeros did I ignore? I ignored 1 0, so I'm going to add that 0 back in. So it's 300. What's a negative times a positive? Negative. And then times negative 1/8. So now that we've simplified the problem as much as we possibly can, we have to decide if we want to make this a decimal or if we want to make this guy a fraction. And to be honest with you, I know a lot of you hate fractions, but dealing with fractions will allow you to solve the problem quicker and way less numbers to number crunch. So I'm going to turn this guy into a fraction. If you want to make this thing into a decimal, knock yourself out, have a great time. The answer will be equivalent in either decimal form or fraction form. So 38 hundredths is 38 hundredths, 38 over 100, times negative 300 over 1 times negative 1 over 8. Now, if you look at these two, hopefully you realize that they share a factor of 100. So I'm going to cross-reduce these. 100 divided by 100, so I'm going to start with these two. 100 divided by 100 is 1. 300 divided by 100 is negative 3. So I'm going to multiply these now. Look at my denominators. 1 times 1 is 1. And I'm going to take 38 times 3, since I can't do it in my head. I'm just going to write it down. 9, 10, 11. And a positive times a negative equals negative. So I multiply these two. I still have this guy left over, so I'm going to take my answer and times it by negative 1 over 8. I promise you we are so close to the end. Negative times negative equals positive. Do you notice how slowly I go through the problem to make sure I'm not missing signs, I'm not missing steps? 1 times 8 is 8. So this entire monstrous problem simplified to 114 over 8. So we're just going to turn it into a mixed number, and this is a pretty easy step. We've learned how to divide fractions. Top number is on the diving board and it goes into the pool. Bottom number is waiting at the stairs. So 8 can't go into 1. 8 can go into 11 one time. Now we multiply. 1 times 8, 8. Subtract. That gives me 3. And now we bring down. 8 goes into 34. 8 times 4 is 32. 2 left over. Stop here, so we're not going to a decimal. You could if you want. So if you wanted to, you add a decimal and a 0. And I think you need to go 2 more decimal places. So my final solution. 8 goes into 114, 14 whole times. There are 2 left over out of groups of 8. And one final touch. We're going to divide by 2 here to reduce the fraction. And that gives us 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And if you continued as a decimal, you would get 14.25. So here is your final answer. So I'm going to flip you back up to the computer screen. Where did Mia make a mistake? Well, she made a couple mistakes. Her first mistake was she made this positive. So instead of doing times reciprocal, she did times opposite sign, which is wrong. That's what you do in addition. You change minus to plus and then take opposite sign. When it's division, you do times reciprocal. So this should be negative 20, just like we did in our work. Just like we did in our work right over here. We did times negative 20. Okay, that's mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, same idea. She turned this to times, but she just copied the next number down. She didn't even do anything with this next number. So if we change divide to times, this should be its reciprocal. So 8 over 1, if you flip it, it's 1 over 8 negative. So these are her 2 mistakes. Again, there's a couple of you that I've worked with. You're like, well, there's other mistakes down here. After this step here, there's a million other mistakes down here. Because she messed up in step 1, she's going to mess up in steps 2, 3, 4, and 5. Does that make sense? So her 2 mistakes that caused all her other mistakes are not converting this to the reciprocal of negative 20 and not turning this into the reciprocal of negative 1 over 8. All right. Well, have a fantastic day, and I'll see you guys Monday. Bye.